concept of replacing ideas. And you mentioned it briefly last week. Didn't focus on it much. Worthy thought. My brain stewed on that. And as I was doing some research, which, as you know, I'm doing a lot of these days, I found something that was really tied in with that. And being a history buff, it stuck. And I said, that's a sermon. So that's what you're going to hear today. I'm going to be reading from Acts chapter 17. And I appreciate your prayers, Billy. Indeed, may God anoint the reading and preaching of His Word. Reading from the New American Standard Version. Kind of a section of Scripture. Can't say it's one of my favorite. Kind of an annoying section to me. How dare I say Scripture? It's annoying. Because I feel his pain. Paul is in Athens waiting on folk. And he is stirred to preach. It doesn't say God's called him to preach. You know, sometimes it says God told him not to go somewhere, and sometimes it says God told him to go somewhere. This is kind of like a truck stop. He's at a truck stop in his life. He's waiting for some folks to join him, waiting to move on with his ministry, and he's in Athens. So, you know, what do you do if you're a preacher and you see people who need preaching? You preach. So, he preaches. So I pondered, was this, you know, God's perfect plan? Did he do it God's perfect way? Because people debate that. The way he preached this sermon, some have said, my, that was brilliant! And I've heard some people say, you know, he should have been more direct. He shouldn't have tried to tie in with the culture so much. So this is a section of Scripture I mulled over and mulled over. But the thing that really I mulled over this week was the concept of replacement, and that's what he was doing. And that's what tied into my history reading, that's what tied into the sermon I heard, and that's why you're getting it. Because what he is doing works. Let me tell you a story. When I was a kid, my dad had a country church, the one I was telling you about this morning. Big lawn, big country house. Across the street, country road, there was a tree that had grown wild, an apple tree. Somebody threw a core out the window. I always plant. Do you? Always plant your cores? Pick a spot, throw it? I'm a country boy, so I always plant my core somewhere. Someone had planted this core, and there was apples one spring that were just tremendous. The tree was packed. The apples were huge. I remember my mom saying, you don't want to eat that, that's a cooking apple. It was still sweet, it was wonderful. The apple was huge by my standards as an adult, as a child. And I was probably 4. Apple was as big as my head. In my memory, at least. Are you picturing this apple? Stop it. I forbid you to think about apples. Don't you dare think about green apples. Don't think. Yellow delicious. Stop. Don't think about yellow. Galas. They're our favorite now. Do not think about an apple. I bet you don't think about apples, aren't you? And that's what we heard about, and that's what I'm tying into. You're going to think about apples till I tell you about oranges. I want orange trees in our house. My mom had a miniature orange tree when I was a kid. I remember them flowering in January. The little oranges took forever to mature, but then we made great, drink out of them. Do you know you can get dwarf orange trees for your house? You can get dwarf grapefruit trees. In Israel, they have hybridized a grapefruit that actually tastes like an orange, that's almost seedless, that you can grow dwarf in your house. None of you have been thinking about apples for at least 2 minutes. Am I right? You switched! That's the sermon title, Apples and Oranges. Acts chapter 17. I'm going to read about how Paul tried to tie in and switch them from thinking about apples to oranges. Switch them, a religious people, to focusing on the one true God. I'm going to be reading from verse 16 through the end of that chapter. Now, while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was being provoked within him as he was observing the city full of idols. So he was reasoning in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Gentiles, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be present. And also some of the Epicureans and Stoic philosophers were conversing with him. Some were saying, "What would this idle babbler wish to say?" Others, "He seems to be proclaiming strange deities." Notice plural, deities. Where did they get deities? Because he is preaching Jesus and the resurrection. They thought resurrection was the name of another god. He was preaching two gods. Their brains were so much focused on apples that all they saw were apples. They were polytheists. They worshiped many gods. So he's coming preaching the one true God, and they couldn't even hear it straight. They warped it into Jesus being one God and resurrection being another God. Talk about a tough crowd. You can't even get the concept right of God. And they took him and brought him into the Areopagus, saying, "May we know what this new teaching is which you are proclaiming? For you are bringing some strange things to our ears, so we want to know what these things mean." Now all the Athenians and the strangers visiting there used to spend their time in nothing other than telling or hearing something new. So Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I observe that you are very righteous in all respects." Very religious in all respects. Got that wrong, sorry. "While I was passing through and examining the objects of your worship, I also found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' Therefore, what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and all things in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all people life and breath and all things. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation, and that they would seek God if perhaps they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each of us. For in him we live and move and exist. As even some of your own poets have said, for we also are his children." And by the way, point of brilliance, point of absolute brilliance. They're worshiping stone. Their poets said we're made from him, we're his children. So if we're flesh, if we're thinking, moving beings, and we're made in the image of God, why are you worshiping stone? Think about it. Okay? Brilliance. Okay? Being then the children of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone or an image formed by the art of some thought of man. Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God is now declaring to men that all people everywhere should repent, because he has fixed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness through a man whom he has appointed, having furnished proof to all men by raising him from the dead. Now when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some began to sneer. But others said, "We'll hear more about this again concerning this." So Paul went out of their midst. But some men joined him and believed, among whom also Dionysius the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. They had a culture full of apples. They worshipped, all right, false gods. Many, many, many false gods. And they obviously knew they were missing something. They obviously had that void still in their soul that all mankind has until it's filled with the one true God. The proof of that is that they put one there for the unknown God. They knew something was missing. There's got to be something more out there. But they were religious, all right. They were worshiping all kinds of gods. Gods of same concept, different name as the Greeks. Same concept, different names as the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, and many, 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 many other cultures. Because frankly, it all boils down like this. You either worship the Creator or you worship the creation. And if you worship the creation, human beings' minds, yeah, we wear different clothes, we live in different centuries, but human beings are wired basically the same. I'll bet I could let you guess, and you'd guess what these gods were. They had a god of power. Zeus was his name in some cultures. Jupiter was the name here in this culture. There was always a god of power that was supposedly the leader. They always had some female god for sex, pleasure, love. Venus, Ashtoreth. Can't remember all of the names they threw at this female god. They always had a god, all these cultures had a god, for wealth. Now, in some cultures it was tied literally to money. Worship this thing and you'll be rich. And for most cultures, it was an agrarian god. Worship this god and your seasons will work out. You'll get rain at the proper times. You'll have a good harvest, which boiled down to money, wealth. Okay. The Romans had two, actually. They had Juno. Always troubled me. My website is juno.com. They picked the name for money for the name of their site. Well, I know what they were thinking. I'm not even going to mention the name of the other god, although I'll read his name in a few minutes here. I guess I might as well. Tammuz. It was agrarian. He was the god who came to life every spring when you planted. And then he died every winter when it turned cold and there was no harvest. Why would you want to worship a god who couldn't keep himself alive? Whatever. You're going to worship God, the Creator, or you're going to worship the creation. And if you heard the psychology in there, what do people seek? Love, power, or money? Did you hear that in the false gods? We're not that much different. Our clothes may look better. They would disagree. Our chairs are more comfortable. But people are people. They worshipped false gods. Paul, I would argue, was brilliant. I could scream at you all day, don't think about apples, and the more I scream about it, the more you're going to think about apples. I could scream at you all day, don't do such and such sin. And the more I scream at you about don't do that sin, you're going to be thinking about that sin. Either feeling guilty about it or planning to do it next. Or both. He was trying to replace this with this. And he found a way to stick his nose under the tent. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's an old saying, never let a camel stick his nose under your tent. Do you know why? You're going to be sleeping with a camel. Because once you let that camel stick his nose under the tent, he's a strong enough animal, he's lifting, and he's inside. So you never let a camel stick their nose. I remember this from all the years I lived in the desert. I'm a very cultured man. I bet you remember that, though, won't you? He was sticking his nose under their tent. You've got all these false idols, but I've got a way to preach at you. You know you're missing something. I know what you need. Let me stick my nose under the tent. Good strategy. Give me an inch, Paul's thinking. I'm taking a mile. And I'm going to replace your apple with my orange. Works, doesn't it? That's why he did it. Didn't win them all, but it won some. You know, the enemy does the same thing. I'm going to read to you. May I read some history? You're an intelligent group. I'm reading from a book that was published in 1893. It was the modern rehash of the Church Fathers. I actually got a lot out of this. Using it from my book, I was interested in where Christ was born. Justin Martyr recorded in about 150 A.D. That Jesus was born in a cave, talked about it. Origen, 100 years later, did the same thing, talked about the same cave. And Jerome, about 100 years after that, you're about 340 A.D., did the same thing. Okay, and I'm going to read his quote. Like, I got into it because I was curious where Jesus was born. Did we really know? And they really knew. Let me read it because it's tying into what we're doing here. Okay, can I do that? From the time of Hadrian to the reign of Constantine, 117 A.D. to 330 something. Okay, just to give you a time picture. Okay, 117, 80 years after Christ, basically. From the time of Hadrian to the reign of Constantine, a period of about 180 years, the spot which had witnessed the resurrection was occupied by a figure of Jupiter, god of power. Why would he do that? While on the rock where the cross had stood, a marble statue of Venus was set up by the heathen and became an object of worship. And there you go, there's your female sex god thing. The original persecutors indeed supposed that by polluting our holy places, they would deprive us of our faith in the passion and in the resurrection. Even my own Bethlehem, Jerome was from Bethlehem, as it now is, that most venerable spot in the whole world of which the psalmist sings, the truth hath sprung out of the earth. Jesus was the truth sprung out of the earth. Interesting, he's tying a prophecy that nobody even saw as a prophecy to Christ because he sprang out of the earth in this sense. Was overshadowed by a grove of Tammuz, that is Adonis, that's the Greek name. And in the very cave, Christ was born in a house cave. There you go. Read my book. You got to buy it. Read my book. He was born in a cave that was used as a house, which wasn't uncommon in the day. Okay? And that's why he's saying the truth sprung out of the earth. Christ was born in a house cave, and yes, they had mangers. Read my book. Okay. Where the infant Christ has uttered his earliest cry, lamentations was made for the paramour of Venus. Venus's lover was Tammuz, the agrarian wealth god. I'm not meaning to teach all this false stuff. Hadrian was diabolically brilliant. Evil. Do you catch what he did? He didn't like Christianity. Christianity was spreading throughout his empire. So how do you defeat Christianity? By screaming at the people, "You worship Jesus, we kill you!" They had tried that. It wasn't working. The more you feed to the lions, the more there's out there. The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, they say. You can't beat Christianity by killing Christians. But if I can take away their opportunity for the orange and replace it with an apple, you get the apple's the bad guy in the sermon? Sorry. I know what I'll do. I'll put an idol to power, Jupiter, at the empty tomb. I'll put an idol to sex and pleasure where he died. And I'll put an idol for wealth and agrarian success right in front of the cave where he was born. Because these Christians are going to these sites and worshiping Jesus and being encouraged in Jesus, and they're teaching their kids how real it was. This is where he was born, this is where he died, this is where he rose. Hold on to this truth. As opposed to what we're doing now, where we tell kids in school, Jesus might not have even existed, which is ridiculous. There's so much evidence to his existence. But they still try it. So people were taking, oh, by the way, you know where this letter came from? Jerome was writing to a guy in Europe who was planning on making a pilgrimage, a huge amount of money in that day and age, 330 AD. He wanted to go to Israel to see these places, and Jerome is sending him saying, hey, you're going to be disappointed. It's not the way you expect it. Hadrian thought, if I just replace the orange with the apple, I get them to stop worshiping. Paul was brilliant, doing it in one direction. Hadrian was brilliant, doing it in the other direction. We're way too advanced for that stuff to work on us. You can tell. You can tell. You look at the church. You can see in America how that strategy doesn't work because we're way too smart for that. You can tell. You want to know? I'll prove it to you. You skeptic with a beard. I can see it in your eyes. God will forgive you for that beard. No. I'm just jealous I can't grow one. I'll prove it. I'll prove that this doesn't work. The 4 T's. Time, treasure, talent, treasure, and testimony. Time. Every Christian's in church on Sunday. You have to fight them out of prayer meeting. Most do on Wednesday, we do it on Tuesday. We have a problem with seating in your house. It's just overwhelming. Because Christians, they have to be in church on Sunday. They'll never miss. And all you have to do is invite them to a midweek prayer service, and they're there, knee pads on, ready to kneel, because they want to pray. Sunday night, oh my, is that a problem? Every church in America is so overwhelmed because these churches have multiple services on Sunday morning, and then everybody wants to get in Sunday night, and they don't, standing room only in churches in America, because our time belongs to God. And really all he's asking for is a few hours in a week that has over 100. Of course we're all there. Time, talent. Talent? You call for a work day in a church in America, you got people all over the place because they want to clean toilets, rake the lawn. I had to fight people away from our lawnmower when we were doing the mowing. Time, talent, treasure. We have to hide our offering plate at the entrance because people are so anxious in any church in America to give their 10% and more. I'm embarrassed how much they pay preachers in America. I am so stinking rich. Oh boy, I'm really getting... Because people want to give so much to God. And testimony. I mean, Christians are talking about their faith left and right so much. The church is growing so fast because everybody is talking about what Jesus has done in their life. That's why we have a seating problem in our churches in America. Because all those tricks of replacing our God with other garbage haven't worked because we're too smart for that. My tongue has grown inside my mouth so that it's hitting both cheeks. Are you with me? Yeah. Boy, it has worked, hasn't it? We've replaced God with what? Sports. People stay home from church because they got to prepare for the football game. Because they're going to have a friend over and they just got to have their dip just right. Go buy dip on the way home. Whatever. Football. Have you seen the list of sports you can get a kid into? You folks who are older than me, and I'm dust, you don't know what I'm talking about. But if you have a kid today, the public schools grab your kid and channel them into some activity. They got to keep them busy. Heaven forbid they have time to spend with mom and dad at home. I'm being sarcastic, but I'm not. It's diabolical. It's horrible. Kids used to go to school, come home and take care of the cows and sat down with mom. And they bonded with family. Now they've got every club in the world and training. My kid made the mistake. I shouldn't have got him in baseball. High school baseball. Good night. Off season, January. 4, 5, 6 days a week. Frying the kids' arms, destroying them because we got to train them for the next season. Like the next season matters. So Sunday morning, what choices do you have? My daughter had a softball game, had 6 a.m. practices Sunday morning because the indoor gym was booked. And then they would have games through Sunday morning service in January for softball. We have replaced God with softball, baseball, football, soccer, for goodness sakes. Why do we want to play that? I don't know. And there's thousands of other sports out there. Before we shake our fingers at those kids, how many men accept overtime Sunday morning because they just got to get the better boat next fishing season? How many of us just have to hit? The name says it all. Flea markets. Why do you want to buy fleas? I cannot fathom the hours spent mulling over junk to be bought, to be resold at their table in a few weeks. They're obsessed by making a couple of quarters. Tell me I'm wrong. Sunday morning. Pastor, I'd be in church, but we're busy. Conversation. They're at the flea market. You're offending the God who could make you a millionaire so you can make a quarter? Are you that dumb? I'm sorry. Did I say that? We're worshiping the creation instead of the creator. And by the way, I just described the Christian church, not the heathens. The heathens are still sleeping off their stupor from Friday night and Saturday, so they can't get their kid to training Sunday morning. I'm talking about a lot of Christian folk. I'm sorry. I was there. Replacement. They scream at us, evolution, 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 evolution. It works for some. But for anybody who has a brain, do you know that 1,000 PhDs are listed in a document PhDs in biology, microscience, chemistry, blah, blah, blah. 1,000 international leaders in science have signed a document saying evolution needs to be reevaluated. It's wrong. Now, in the news, they'll tell you evolution is, everybody believes that. Every scientist believes that. Just 1,000 of the best on the planet say no! We'll ignore them. I don't need those anyhow. They tried to, they tried to get us to replace truth with a lie, with evolution. They try to get us to accept the lie that Jesus wasn't born. And these things work for some people. But not if you're a thinking human being with an open mind and an open heart. Even if you don't want to believe in Jesus, He existed. Even if you love your evolution, you have to admit you don't have all the answers. Because nothing from nothing leaves nothing. I can even write a song about it. Well, someone did that. So what does the council of demons in hell decide to do to stop the church? Get them thinking about apples. If they won't deny Jesus, just get them so busy they don't go to church to grow in Jesus. You think it'll work? I think it has. So what's the solution? Philippians 4:12. What's it say, Patty? Quote it for me.
4:8, you mean?
4:8, yeah.
Whatsoever things are pure.
Read it
whatsoever
for
things
me.
are pure.
And while you're doing that, Billy, you're going to quote Romans 10:12 for us. 12, did I get it backwards?
Yeah.
Say it. Come on.
Do not be conformed any longer to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Turn off the stupid box. Put down the phone. You can live without it. And let Christ renew your mind. Somebody's going to win. Either Satan is going to replace your focus on the one true God with all the creation. Pick your poison. You want to worship Tammuz, Jupiter, Venus? I'll name 20 more. Satan doesn't care which way you end up in hell. You with me? You understand what I'm saying? That's going to happen if you don't choose to let the Lord renew your mind. And verse 4:8.
Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things.
There's your antidote. Because if we as Christians focus on letting God renew our mind, and let Him renew it with those things now, the creation doesn't matter. Because we have the Creator. He's governing our life. Apples and oranges have always existed. They will exist until the Lord throws the curtain down on this planet. You just got to pick. Discipline yourself and pick what you're going to think about. Worship the Creator with your time, talent, treasure, testimony. Let Him be Lord. Father, I pray that that would be burned into our souls, that we won't settle for lesser things. I pray that you would remove, pluck up, destroy the false idols by whatever name they are. We're so smug. We look back at these other cultures and think, we don't worship And yeah, we do. We replace stone with plastic. Remove those idols from our hearts, our minds, our souls. May we focus on you and worship you with every fiber of our being. In Jesus' name. God's people said,
Amen.
Amen.